are you guys doing today? Tonight.
Wow.
We're doing good. Okay. Well, thank you guys so much for coming for our Black Panther teach-in. My name is Abby, and I'm the president of BSU.
My name is Gari. I'm the president of Panthers for Progress.
And we're just going to say thank you so much for our speaker.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I know. I'm so excited for you to be here. So we're just going to do like a quick introduction of who she is because a lot of people probably don't know about her. But yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So this is Dr. Robyn Spencer, everyone. We're so glad to have you here tonight doing this teaching for us.
Yes.
So Dr. Spencer is a historian whose research focuses on Black social protest after World War II, urban and working class radicalism, and gender. She teaches survey and seminar courses on Black history at Lehman College and graduate level courses at the Graduate Center, CUNY. In 2018 to 2019, she was visiting endowed chair in women's and gender studies at Brooklyn College. Her first book, The Revolution Has Come, Black Power, Gender, and the Black Panther Party in Oakland, analyzes the organizational evaluation of the Black Panther Party in Oakland. It was a finalist for the Benjamin Hooks Institute National Book Award, sponsored by the Benjamin L. Hooks Institute for Social Change at the University of Memphis, and received honorable mention from Letitia Woods Brown Book Prize, sponsored by the Association of Black Women's Historians. Her second book project, To Build the World Anew, Black Liberation Politics and the Movement Against the Vietnam War, explores how and why the anti-imperialist struggle for Vietnamese independence became a rallying point for U.S.-based Black activists who were part of the freedom movement of the 1950s and 1970s.
Yes. This project was supported by the Mellon Mid-Career Fellowship at Yale University in 2016-2017, a Franklin Research Grant from the American Philosophy Society in 2018, and will be supported by ACLS Frederick Woodhark Residential Fellowship for recently tenured scholars at the Institute of Advanced Study, the School of Social Science in 2020-2021. She is also working on 2 biographies of Black women, left theorist Patricia Robinson and Angela Davis, internationally acclaimed radical activists. She has. Again, thank you guys so much for coming, and the floor is all yours. And we also want to thank ABC Department for definitely sponsoring. Thank you so much.
And just to give like a brief overview of tonight's events, we're gonna have Dr. Spencer do her teach-in for us, and then afterwards we're gonna have a little Kahoot that's gonna be a little bit different. It's gonna be about the history of the Black Panther Party too, but you guys are gonna have a chance to win a prize. So the winner of the Kahoot will get a poster of Malcolm X and some pins. So stick around for that. Also, we have food in the corner if anybody wants to eat. That's it from us. You can take the floor.
Thank you very much.
Thank
you. Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here. I know it's middle of semester and anxieties and demands are very, very high. So I really appreciate the student clubs that came together, the faculty member and staff, the people in the audience, as well as you students here at Adelphi. I'm so pleased to be here. This is my first ever talk at Adelphi University, so I'm excited about that. So just some updates, and I got to update myself. I got married since I put, getting used to these things. So last name is now Spencer-Antoine, and I'm at Wayne State University, which is in Detroit, Michigan. So I do come back to New York often because my family and friends and networks are here. So I'm so happy that I could overlap my time here in New York with this visit to you. Okay, so next. I wanted to start off with sort of my journey as a person who became interested in the topic as an undergraduate student and decided to pursue it as a graduate student. And that opened a path into a career, a passion, a life work that has stayed with me decades and decades later. So this is young Robyn over here. It was the 90s, as you can see from my attire. Although you don't think your attire is speaking your time period until time has passed, and then people are like, oh, that was so 2020 or whatever. But this is very 90s, and it's me at the Black Panther Party reunion in 1966 in Oakland, California. I became interested in the Black Panther Party as an undergraduate student at SUNY Binghamton, and I took courses there. Well, I started out pre-med, I should say. That did not work out too well for me. I quickly just kind of dived into my history electives where I was doing really, really well. And I left behind my chemistry and physics courses in which I was not doing really, really well. And I sort of found my passion in history as an undergraduate history major, and I learned about the Panthers in a course. So these pictures kind of represent me taking the history that I was learning in just by reading and taking it to the point where I could actually meet people who were part of the Black Panther Party organization. I learned that there are Black Panther Party reunions every single year. There's, in 2025, 2026, you can go to Oakland, to other parts of the country where they will have a Black Panther Party film festival or Black Panther Party reunions where you can meet people who were involved in the organization. And depending on where you are in life and where they are in life, I mean, if they were young people in the 60s, here in 2020, 2025, we're going to expect them to be in their 70s, hitting 80s. And so you'll find yourself in a group of elders who were revolutionaries when they were young and who are still revolutionaries. So I wanted to share that. So this is me at the reunion where I met two other young scholars who were writing about the Black Panther Party. At the time, very few people had heard about the organization. And what they heard about was bad. Like they were, shooting police officers and followers of Malcolm X. That was all that people knew about the organization. So it was really important for me, who had a broader view into what their importance was, to find other people, especially young women, because the Panthers were also associated with this tough, aggressive ideal of manhood, to find other young women scholars who were budding scholars who were also writing about the Panthers and also interested in making sure that we also spoke about the women who were part of the organization. This is me meeting my very first Panther woman, whose name is Kilu Nyasha. She passed away, but she was a member of the Black Panther Party in San Francisco, California, and I got a chance to meet with her, to interview her, and she really sort of helped me to figure out the questions I wanted to ask from people who were involved in the Black Panther Party. And she also gave me a lesson on, I guess, just the realities of oral interviews, that people who participated in these movements in the past also are filled with painful memories, sacrifice, and struggles that could be ongoing from that decision they made as a young person, because maybe they were arrested one too many times and that impacted their job history for the rest of their lives. Maybe their loved one died. Maybe their parents rejected them when they said, I'm going to join the Black Panther Party. So it wasn't always flowers and rosebuds, I found, when I spoke to people who were involved in the Black Panther Party. And Kilu Nyasha helped me to kind of understand that. So this is, of course, SUNY Binghamton, which is where I went to undergrad. And I took a course where I learned about Assata Shakur. I read a book called Assata. And it really blew my mind because she was writing about New York. She was in the Bronx. She was going to BMCC. And she was just living her life in New York as a young woman, but also going from being someone who would watch the news and just take it all in and believe it all, whose ideals were kind of her parents' ideas, to getting a more critical view of the world and thinking more deeply. And I felt like I was undergoing that same process like she was. Okay, next slide. Yes. So when we think about the Black Panther Party, we tend to think about men. I call this dominant images, and not just men, but weaponry, uniforms, armed patrols, militaristic nature. This is what we think about when we think about the people who were involved in the Black Panther Party. Here are the first people who joined. And I love to show this picture because just like with any other group, I know that there are two clubs who are sponsoring me. When they started the Black Panther Party, everyone was not like, hey, I want to join you. No. Who did they get? Their friends. They got two brothers, the people they hung out with on their block. Like, that was their initial core membership. People who knew each other from social ties, and people who were willing to invest their energies into building the organization. And when I spoke to people, they talked about feeling like they were competing with, like, fraternities, or, all the other things that people could join. You could be part of the Nation of Islam. You could be part of SNCC. You could be part of, CORE. These are other civil rights organizations. Why? What would the Black Panther Party do to kind of stand out, right? And are they competing with the other group? Why do we need a Black Panther Party if we have a SNCC, right? Anyone who involves an organization knows that you get that question. Why do we need a Black Panther Club when we have a Black Student Union, right? So differentiating yourself and stating your mission and goals was one thing they did to sort of build up their membership base. What I say about these pictures, too, is they reveal and conceal at the same time. It seems like they're telling you a lot about what the organization was about, but there are also many, many missing parts in these images. So, next slide. Yeah. And when we think about these images have gone into popular culture as well, right? So here's hip-hop artist Nas. This is Huey Newton, founder in 1966, in a posed picture of himself in a wicker chair and a spear. Here is hip-hop artist Nas recreating this on the cover of Vibe magazine. Next. And here, even though people don't make the association, but the same artist who created this throne for T'Challa from Black Panther was inspired by this image of Huey Newton. So even though we don't think about like how these images continue to circulate and what they're revealing and concealing, right? This was one individual in a posed picture, right? And it's what we remember, what we take away from how we think about this organization. So next, thank you. Yeah. Which brings me to this quote from Audre Lorde, which I love, where she talks about self-definition, like the power to say who you are, what your ideals are, what your motivations are, what your goals are. The Black Panther Party had to struggle for this because there was so much misinformation when they came out with an organization called the Black Panther Party for self-defense. Were they a gun club? Were they doing aggressive action? Were they violent? What was really behind the name? So this act of self-definition was very key to how Black Panther Party members designed their imprint, right, on history. So I want to share that too, that they were not just victims of how other people saw them, but they worked really hard. They had a newspaper, I'll talk about that later. They used art, I'll talk about that later. They had police patrols. They did quite a few things to kind of bring themselves out into the public eye. So I want to pause for a moment here, and I'm going to, thank you, escape. I'm going to escape. And I'm going to show you a clip from Panther leader Bobby Seale describing one of the first things the Panthers did, which were police patrols. So Bobby Seale, if you go back here, is this guy up here, this guy here, this guy here, right? He was a stand-up comedian. Communication, the ability to communicate was really key. You had to be able to rap to people. You couldn't be all, oh, I'm here for the Black Panther Party. And no, you had to be able to speak to people in the language that they were used to hear. You had to be able to convince them, and he used those skills. So you'll see him here talking about the Black Panther Party, and one of the first things they did, which was these police patrols. And what you will also see is young Robyn, who, this was one of the best moments I had as a researcher, because I went and I met everyone at the reunion. I was like, oh, I'm writing a book about you guys, and people were like, oh, you're writing a book about us. Oh, you're such a nice young lady. Come over. So I was invited to like barbecues and stuff like that, where I met people. And then Bobby Seale was like, well, I'm going to be interviewed for this documentary. Do you want to come with me? And I was like, of course. And it was really one of the best moments that I had as a researcher. And so you'll see me in there. I didn't say a word. And you'll see me in the same clothes as before because I was a broke student, so there wasn't too many clothes that were traveling with me to California, to do this. But it really, I was there so he could look like he's talking to someone. So you'll see me, but mainly the focus is on him and his description of the police patrols that the Panthers did.
That night we had been patrolling Badge 206 up on Telegraph Avenue for some 10 or 15 blocks. He turned off at the street around the corner here, and then when we got to that street 2 blocks later behind him, came down the street. He was sitting under the stop sign with his lights off. So we said, there's that cop. And so we turned in front of him. As we turned in front of him, he flashed his headlights on and his high beams on. And naturally, I'm holding a shotgun, and you can see it through the window. I'm holding Chewy's shotgun in my left hand. We turn around and come down this street. Well, the police's light is suddenly behind us and flashing. Huey, I says, Huey, he's flashed his light, we might as well stop. And Huey says, no, I'm gonna test the law. I could be colorblind, Huey says. And I said, okay. He says, let him turn his siren on. So as he came down, he bleeped his siren, and Huey stops right about here. And the police officer's front of his car was stopped here. And suddenly, as we stop, well, naturally, we're just gonna give license, but the cop gets out of his car. Who the hell you goddamn niggas think you are? Get out of that car with them goddamn guns. Get out of that goddamn car. And the cop came up and grabbed our door, snatched it open, reached in across Huey to attempt to grab Huey's shotgun. But I was holding Huey's shotgun because Huey is driving. I'm pulling back. Huey hits the cop. Little Bobby Hutton's in the back seat. He tries to hit the cop with the butt of his gun. And then Huey gets his feet out and kicks the cop out, grabs his gun. I come around the front with the .45, little Bobby Hutton goes to the back of our car with his M1. Huey is out. The cop is stumbling back, wanting to go for his gun. Huey says, go for it and I'll blow your brains out. I'm over here and I says, you come up here from Tallahassee, cut, shoot, wind come from 10 miles north of Mule Creek Junction, thinking you're gonna brutalize us in our black community. You're gonna get your ass killed out here, you racist son of a bitch. Black folks are coming out of this house. The cop says, come on out, folks. Come on out, folks. The niggas got too many guns. Now, these are black folks. This white cop is saying, come on out, folks. The niggas got too many guns. The assistant DA comes up and finally pulls Badge 206 to the side and tells Badge 206, the guns are legal. The guns are legal. You really can't arrest them. And Badge 206 is fuming. We gotta do something. We gotta do something. So Badge 206 walks up to my car, and he sees my license plate hanging there, but I have a coat hanger through the holes to make my license plate attached to the bumper. So he begins to write me a ticket for the license plate being on with a coat hanger. And I take the ticket, the cops leave, we give a speech to the people that we organize the community, going to patrol these racist police out here. They've been brutalizing our people in the community, etc. Now, we're about what? At best, March, we started the party in October, 4 or 5 months old. At that time, we'd been patrolling police with illegal guns, law books, tape recorders. But Badge 206 that night, when he attempted to do that, he almost got killed. But just because we were disciplined in the methodology is the reason. Because it was not emotionalism so much as we were trying to capture the imagination of the people, to let them see some disciplined people, young black men in our community, ready to defend ourselves from some burly racist cop. And just like I told him, you know, you bring your ass down here from Tallahassee, cut, shoot, wind come from 10 miles north of Mule Creek Junction, thinking you're going to brutalize us black folk. Well, I guess that shocked this cop.
The problem was...
Okay. So I'm going to go from there. I'll let that soak in, and we can talk about it more in the Q&A, to thinking about how women figure into this image of who the Black Panther Party was. So the Super Bowl, everyone's talking Super Bowl, halftime performances. So you might remember Beyonce's Super Bowl performance where she did this performance. And many people looked at what she did and hearkened it to the history of the 1960s, particularly the history of the Black Panther Party and Black Panther women. And it was a mixed review because on the one hand, it was raising awareness that there was even the Black Panther Party of people who may have never even heard about this. And, you know, people watch the Super Bowl and they think they're watching football, but halftime comes around, you may learn something you didn't think you even needed to know and give them more things to think about. And then there were other people that said, well, hey, I was a woman in the Black Panther Party and I don't remember these outfits, you know, and things like that. Like, is it objectifying them? Is it too much, et cetera, et cetera? So how are we thinking about who these women in the Black Panther Party were and how do we see them? So next slide. So seeing them, What I found is that there were actually tons and tons of pictures of women who were involved in the Black Panther Party. And not only that, I found that in the pictures with women, you could see more political life in the organization. And you could also see men doing different things. The pictures of the women would sometimes have men as well, and you would see the men in different kind of roles, just not posed up or marching and things like that. So from these images, you can see that the Black Panther Party engaged in voter registration. It's something they're not associated with usually. They did a lot of clerical work, right? It was nice to say, oh, we got our newspaper out, etc. But they were literally like getting their newspaper out to tens of thousands of people around the country and around the world. And that meant that people made tremendous sacrifice. And it wasn't like, oh, it was filled with journalism majors. No, you came there, you made a dropped out of high school, dropped out of college, and it was like, well, what skills do you have? How can you contribute? And people were given roles based on the contributions that they could make. You see that women were arrested. You see women and men preparing food. One of the most popular programs the Panthers had were Breakfast for School Children, where they organized themselves, oftentimes with local churches, to feed children breakfast before school, understanding that hunger prevents you from, being able to learn and think. Now, I know you cannot relate because no one has gone over and really attacked the pizza, so you're not hungry. But I know that at the end you will go over there and eat that. And then here is Panther activist Connie Matthews, who's speaking to a crowd. What I love about that is that she's speaking to a white crowd, right? That the Panthers had audience not just in the Black community, but they were also followed by white radicals and others who wanted to learn more about their political program. Next. So I wanted just to share some quotes from Panther women with some of their images. So it's not like they're not images of Panther women in formation, like how you see the men in military formation with their uniforms, etc. The reality is because of the harassment that they began to face as members of the organization, these kind of identifying uniforms were only used at things like official events and, unfortunately, funerals. So here's someone who says, I like the fact that they appeared to be disciplined. They didn't take any mess from anybody. They were really serious. And I put this up there because I don't want you to say, well, the women joined to feed the children, the men joined to be militant revolutionaries. There were some men who joined very attracted to the community programs that the Panthers did, from feeding the children to free shoes to giving away food to escorting senior citizens to the bank. All of those things, men and women participated in. But the women were also attracted to the strength, the power, the ability to command, the ability to protect their community. Oftentimes, women and children get lumped together in need of protection. Here were Panther women saying, we have the skills we have learned to be able to protect alongside our male counterparts. Next. Here's another one. Their mystique, the black pants, leather jackets, berets, guns, and their talk, aggressive and direct, attracted me. Many of the Panther women that I interviewed, when I would ask them, why did you join the organization, they talked about police harassment, not of their brothers, uncles, and fathers, but of themselves, how they were profiled as sex workers, if they were in cars, how the police confronted them, how it felt to be a young person going to school and walking in a community and being fearful of being stopped by police, and the sexual harassment and sexual violence they would face as well. So women who joined the organization joined for many reasons, right? Similar to men, there was a lot of overlap, but there were uniquely specific reasons that were also there as well. Okay, next. So I wanted to move on to another way the Panthers spoke to their community, which is the artwork, right? So this is from Emory Douglas, who was the Panthers' Minister of Culture. They were known for calling the police pigs. This was their way of gaining verbal power over a system that felt like had power over them. And so by calling the police pigs and depicting them as pigs and buying into the way that the pigs were seen as a very contested animal, people have strong feelings, whether it be religious exclusions, whether it be people who feel pigs are unclean. This was a moment where even in terms of how people ate, there was a lot of questioning over the traditional ways of eating. The Nation of Islam had, come out and criticized, eating of pork and things like that. So the pig had carried all of that history, right? And of course, Emory Douglas just put it into action, allowing people to imagine themselves like, yeah, you have power, you have control. You can flip the script in a scenario in which it feels like someone else has ultimate power over you, right? So here they are, and what I also like about the images is that he shows men and women together, in these tactics, as well, and the graphics are easy to gather. This was also a way of communicating to people who maybe wouldn't sit there and read a long, script about what the Panthers were doing, what they were about, but who were visual learners, as we would say today, and can see this and can get it. Like, oh, okay, you do something with self-defense. You're focused on the police, and people could ask their questions based on that. So next. Here's another one. This was by Matalava. There was also women who were graphic artists in the Black Panther Party. So this is Tarika Lewis, and this depicts Black leaders who are kissing the police's fly-ridden bottoms, and the Panther pair, man and woman, who are there to kind of set things straight. Right. So there are visual stories also in the images and critiques of how other organizations were moving and mobilizing at this time. So here I wanted to show a brief clip about women in the Black Panther Party in their own words, so I'm going to do that. Okay, we're going to go off. This was, maybe this is why I have two of them.
I was in labor cooking breakfast for a breakfast program. So I was between contractions flipping pancakes.
I would spend all the day answering the phones, even after I had my son when I came back to work. I used to have to jump him up and down really heavy because it just wouldn't stop crying as I'm answering the phone.
You name it. I clean freezers with a toothpick.
And that's how I'd answer the phone. Black Panther Party National Headquarters, Black Panther Party Central Headquarters, can I help you?
Dear Huey, when I joined the party, I was thrilled about becoming part of an organization that believes in the equality of men and women. It bothers me that there are brothers who still view women as sexual objects. We should have no men in the Black Panther Party who feel this way, or women for that matter.
One of the ironies of the Black Panther Party is that the image is the black male with the jacket and the gun, but the reality is that the majority of the rank and file by the end of the 60s are women.
Everybody knows that all the people don't have liberty, all the people don't have freedom, all the people don't have justice, and all the people don't have power, so that means none of us do.
The Black Panther Party certainly had a chauvinist tone, and so we tried to change some of the clear gender roles so that women had guns and men cooked breakfast for children. Did we overcome it? Of course we didn't. As I like to say, we didn't get these brothers from revolutionary heaven.
More to mull over for our Q&A, but I wanted to share that in particular just for some takeaways. I mean, we don't think about an organization like the Black Panther Party answering phones, right? They were an organization. In other words, you called a number and someone picked up and said, Black Panther Party, can I help you? If you wrote them a letter, you got a letter back on a letterhead, right? They were organized. They had minutes to their meetings. They had memos. They had childcare for the people who did have children who were part of the organization. They really tried to meet the needs of their members in a full way in order to allow them to be the full-time activists that they were. It wasn't that you were in the Black Panther Party Monday and Friday after 5. No, you gave up much of your life, whether it meant dropping out of school. Sometimes your parents were deeply, deeply unsupportive of that action at a time where so many Black college students, people had fought really hard, to open those gates of access. And dropping out felt very scary, like a move that maybe you wouldn't recover from, right? So people had that. And also an organization that had rules, right? Things that you had to do, ways you had to be, et cetera, et cetera. And the rules tell you something. Every time I see a rule, I know that's because somebody thought to do that thing. Else why would we have a rule against that thing, right? So it also gives you a sense of what's happening in the organization, right? Selling the newspaper. You saw that in the very end of that clip. And everybody has to send the newspaper. The newspaper selling is not just for the lowest person on the totem pole. Even people with status and hierarchy have to get out there, talk to the community, and try to sell them those Panther newspapers. Here, daily reports to the chief of staff. All laggards will be suspended immediately. In other words, you have to say, what are you doing every day? Right? You just can't be out there, I'm in the Black Panther Party, but I'm just hanging at the office. No. You had to have a log that said, this is what I did today. And in the archive, you'll find hundreds of these daily work reports, which will allow you to be able to say with some clarity what was happening in Baltimore, what was happening in Chicago, what was happening in Los Angeles with the Black Panther Party. And maintenance of office should be rotated so each section exercises equal work. So we're not going to be leaving the office messy. Women are not going to be the ones who are on cleanup duty, who are on cooking duty, who are on maintenance duty. Everyone is going to play that role, so you kind of see that in what they're doing. I wanted to also give a sense of just the scope of work. I also love that you have a young boy as a paper boy. The Black Panther Party definitely was very rooted in community, right? And they connected with children. And I think that's something that people don't know about them, because it feels like when you don't know that they were a scary organization. They were, disorganized. They were just pop-up, marchers. Not that they were deep in the fabric of these communities. And then look at all those newspapers, too. Like I said, the newspapers went all around the country, all around the world. And in my book, one of the things I found is that people talk a lot about, like, COINTELPRO and the role of the FBI in surveilling the Panthers. But I found things like the Postal Service delaying their papers, and the papers would arrive soaked, and all of the things that happen in other agencies, the IRS, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, next. Wanted to show some pictures of the breakfast program as it expanded around the country. People really took up the breakfast program. It was incredibly popular. The government took up the breakfast program, providing these guaranteed meals before school without an income requirement. Lunches had the income requirement, but the breakfasts did not. So I wanted to give a sense of, here it is in Chicago, there it is in Baltimore, and of course, the man nurturing. Right? I think that's important to know that men were nurturers too of the children, of young people. They were leaders, they were teachers. They played a lot of roles that maybe we don't always see when we think about the Panthers in one particular way. Here's a flyer from the Panthers conference in 1972. By this point, the organization had really shrunk in size. The role of the FBI in decimating the organization is something I talk about in my research. And by this point, they had decided to bring as many people as possible to one location in order to multiply their membership and gain community control. So Oakland, California was that place. Not all chapters closed and went to Oakland, but many did. And when I interviewed people, I met so many people who had left Philly and Baltimore and never went back, even after they finished their tenure or time with the Panthers. They just ended up liking it out there and never went back east, as they now call it. But I love this because it shows you like all of their connections. Like they have a reverend speaking. They've got each one register once. They're registering people to vote, serve the people, body and soul. They have Angela Davis speaking. They have Erica Huggins. They have politician Ron Dellums. I think there's even a rabbi on here. I can't see from there. Yes, that's the list I'm looking at. They have Johnny Tillman, that's the second one from the Welfare Rights Organization. I have to work on my clarity with that one, probably rescan it. But there were lots of varieties of things. And of course, they're giving away 10,000 free bags of groceries. Now, if you've tried to give away 100 free bags of groceries, you know the level of coordination, volunteering, man and woman power, people power that it takes to pull something like that off, to give away 10,000 bags of groceries, and to have a chicken in every bag. You also know sometimes when you get free groceries, it could be low standard, it could be protein deficient, etc. But they really tried, and you also know that to keep, 10,000 chickens at a food, good temperature and everything like that, they really had to be coordinated to give away those kind of perishables. So, wanted to also share their educational vision. Here are some children. The Panthers created a school. It started out first as for their membership, and then it grew into the Oakland Community School. This image of children who were in the Black Panther Party or being educated by the school, I think really speaks to how they saw their future in terms of creating a legacy left behind and creating cultural norms for children so that they could feel like they're part of something bigger. Now, I interviewed Panther children, and for them, it was a mixed bag because sometimes you just want to play with mom and dad, and go to the park and do those things. And so one person said, for example, the Panthers would sell these greeting cards, like all power to the people or seize the time. Like, I didn't want that for my birthday card, right? So people would talk about, difficulty sometimes of being a child of a revolutionary or someone who is trying to change the world. But they also talk about things like the opportunities they had. And one of the opportunities they had was a sense of collective family. So you may have one, nuclear couple attached to you, but you may have felt like you had many brothers and sisters because of your experience within the organization. Women in the Black Panther Party definitely expressed an enduring comradeship in the 1990s, early 2000s. Women in the Black Panther Party began to meet, to heal some of their fissures, to come together and talk and communicate across difference, across the reality of being in an organization where people are dating each other and what does it mean, and they're questioning monogamy, they have access to birth control, free love for whom, the men, the women, right? All of this, experimenting with, queer relationships, same-sex relationships too, right? There was a lot. It was a lot to be part of this at that time in your life where you're like, a teenager in your early 20s, and that was the average age. So Panther women, decades later, would come together. Here's Kathleen Cleaver. She was the one speaking in the video where she says, all the people don't have freedom, all the people don't have justice, all the people, if none of the people have that, then none of us are free. Rough paraphrase, but I know you remember that because it was the last thing she said. So this is her here, right? So just sharing that. Next. I'm going to share this. I had the chance to go back to Oakland last year, and there is now a Black Panther Party Women's History Museum, and there's a huge mural on the wall, And again, the ideal is that if you say History Museum, maybe 10% of the people are going to come in. But if you put some art on the wall, like everybody can, experience it and see it and have questions. You don't have to enter, any building. And what I love about this is that they also, you can't see, but maybe you can, like the little bricks here, they put as many Panther women's names as they could find, who are written, their names written on the wall. So I think that's also just a significant way of kind of honoring people. And they have this woman from the People's Free Food Program, Serve the People Body and Soul, et cetera, just to give you a sense of that. And this is in a predominantly black, working poor neighborhood. It's nowhere fancy or anything like that, and it's just in the middle of the block. It's surrounded by other residences. It's not in the commercial district or anything. So it really is there in community. So I created a smaller list of some Panther women that I just wanted to kind of throw out there and give the idea that every Panther woman has her own story to tell, right? There was no one experience. If you were highly educated, you may have had one experience. If you were dating a leader, you might have had another experience. If you came in there at 14, you might have had a third experience versus you came in there at 20 or at 25, right? So lots of stories to be told to kind of put together this tapestry of experience of what did it mean to contribute to one of the leading Black Power organizations. Next. So that was it. I wanted to put my book up here, give you some information about me. This is a group, this is called the Intersectional Panther History Project. It's myself and 3 other historians who you might remember. Young Robyn went to the conference in '96 and met with those 2 young women. It's us plus someone else who've come together to try to put out educational resources about the Black Panther Party aimed at teachers. Things that someone in the K-12 system could download or use to kind of learn about. And together we've written articles for popular publications. So really our idea was that if one person can't do it, I mean, together we can each do a little bit, and then we can write something together as a quartet and get it into Vibe and get it into, outlets where the ordinary person would see it, who's not going to take a class, who's not going to pick up a book, who's not going to look at the documentary, but might encounter these words. So thank you so much for your time and attention. I'm more than happy to answer questions or hear your observations or comments. And then I think we're sliding into cahoots. Yes.
I have a question. I was wondering if the portrayal of the Black Panther Party as militant or more of an organized, much like the pictures you saw earlier, were relating towards more of a defamation campaign, as similar to Malcolm X, and making him seem more radical?
Definitely. I think it's a duality, because I think that people like the idea of the Panthers being militant, people who would support them. In some ways, they may like the one-dimensional image. They stood up, strong Black men. That image may resonate for some who might support the organization. But I definitely do think that creating that image and emptying that image of any sort of nuance, any sort of creativity, positivity, is part of a dismantling of the Black radical tradition and how we understand ourselves, in this world. Because the reality is that civil rights organizations were also grappling with self-defense. They were grappling with dating within organizations. They were grappling with the rules within the organization. To think about the Panthers as like an outlier, like they were so different from all the other groups, takes them out of that stream, right? The Panthers, especially being in California, I mean, they were down with, hippies, people who were in the free speech movement, being at the center of white student politics, like the Bay Area was, meant that the Panthers were not just on the radical fringe or only speaking to black folk. They inspired a lot of groups, whether it be Asian Americans, Native Americans, and others. They definitely had a strong and inspirational message, which gets lost when we think about them in the one way. It's like I said, I feel like people will circulate Malcolm X by any means necessary 4,000 times, but never go to read the speech in which he might have said the thing, right? So a lot of boiling down sometimes and shorthand. Other thoughts, questions? Yes.
Could you just go into a bit more detail on what it was like conducting your research on the party and like actually going to these reunions and being involved? What did that look like for you?
It was a lot of things, I want to say. I think because I was one of the first people to do it, that it was kind of like being out there. Like people didn't have like their story down. You know, they would tell me, you know, anything. I may go and I'm in public housing one day, the next day I'm in a mansion. People who were both involved in the Black Panther Party, but their lives took different turns, right? I might be getting hit upon because I'm a woman, you know, doing this research. There was a lot to navigate, even at my institution. You know, there was a sense of, well, this is, you know, you will never get a job with this topic. This is just too out there. Nobody thinks this is important, kind of thing. This is fringe. And those were some of my experiences. I mean, my most memorable experience was, of course, with Bobby Seale, I think, but I got a chance to go to Africa to visit someone who was a part of the Black Panther Party in New York, and that was really great. I got to visit Michael Tabor. He was in Tanzania at the time, and it was just like this big, I feel like I was in like some fact-finding, like espionage mission. So I was told, you know, days before cell and all, you know, real strong email connections and social media. So I was just told, well, he has a radio station. We know that he goes to this, you know, place every day for lunch. I was like, okay, great, I'll go to the place. And they said, but the only women in there are sex workers. I was like, okay, how do, you know, am I going to go to, like, how am I going to manage getting to the place when, you know, there's all of that attached to it? But you find your way, and it's been quite amazing to be with these people as they have evolved, many of whom are now ancestors. You know, I feel like in a way I am preserving their stories, especially the smaller, less well-known people who don't have a big profile. Nobody would know that X person dedicated 6 years of their life to the Black Panther Party. But I know, and you know, if you read the book, that kind of thing. Other questions, thoughts, comments? Stewing. Okay. We have cahoots, but then I guess we talk after too. Yes.
I mean, I want to say thank you. Like, that was so amazing and so informative. But I guess I wanted to ask, like, with the modern revolution, with political movements and activist groups, what are you, I guess, not seeing that we're taking from the Black Panthers, or what could people, like, what lessons could we learn from them and, like, adopt onto our own groups as well today?
That's a great question. I think they're both, I mean, lessons is a big framework. There are positive lessons like try to do more of this, and negative lessons like we don't want to see that anymore. So there's a little bit of both with any organization, right? Because of course they make their mistakes and, you know, things like that. So one of the things I love to point out is just the social connections. Like, because the Panther started in a very kind of face-to-face, even what Bobby Seale said, like, you know, people come out, look at what we're doing with their own two eyes, and then we go and we talk to them, and then they talk to other people, and that is how they grew. And that kind of word of mouth and connection really built trust. I think there's sometimes not a lot of trust within political formations today because people are transient, or you don't know who they are or where they came from, how long they'll be here, all of those things. So get that sort of face-to-face organizing, I think, is something to take away from the history of the Black Panther Party. I think that today's activists have more of at least a sensibility around things like burnout, things like, interorganizational violence, toxicity, those kind. There's at least a language for it. I'm not saying that organizations are harmonious, egalitarian places, because they're not. But in this time period, I think that the Panthers, they didn't have the mechanisms to address issues of that could be a political disagreement expressed personally or personal disagreement expressed politically. You were mad at that one, that one's now an agent, and now everyone's mad at that one, that person gets drummed out, that kind of thing. In terms of thinking about procedures to make it more possible to be a holistic and functioning and even thriving human while fighting the state, while fighting for your life, I think is something that the Panthers were not as successful in doing. Of course, they were being attacked as they were growing, as movements today are being attacked, as they're trying to sow their seeds. So there's something to be learned from there. The Panthers were also very creative. That's another positive lesson. I mean, they had a singing group called the Lumpin'. It was a quartet of male singers who would go around and sing. As I showed you, they had art. They really tried to speak to people on different levels. I think that sometimes today we believe that we need to kind of get the right wording down and get the correct analysis ready before we can go out there and, mobilize the masses. And I think the Panthers just kind of learned in motion, for better or for worse. And they tried to speak in multiple languages. It was English all, but, multiple registers, I should say, with the same language, like art, and there was even poetry. Erica Huggins was a poet, etc. They also really thought about the role of prisons in their movement. They were emerging at a time of heightened repression through incarceration. Many Panther leaders and members became political prisoners, and having a very strong analysis of the role of the criminal legal system, I think, is something that they embraced, and also connecting people from the outside to the inside, whether that meant reading what people wrote, as well as read, etc. Today it can feel like our political prisoners are when they're locked away, they're the small group of their support committee, but the larger movement is not rallying around the folks that are inside or seeing them as connected to the people outside. And I think that that's kind of something to kind of take away. And finally, the Panthers were big internationalists. They went to China, they went to Cuba, they went to Africa. They really thought about global justice. They went to the Middle East. And we're not afraid to make connections and to understand that the domestic and the international were intertwined. Like Kathleen Cleaver said, how can we be free here if we know right there people are being executed simply for being who they are? We can't just think about racism, we have to think about colonialism, we have to think about imperialism, and we can do that all at the same time. So I think that's another legacy. Other questions or thoughts? Yes?
This is just like history, I think, that I want to clarify, because you hear a lot of like different things about the Black Panther Party. Is it true that Hugh Newton actually got invited to China before President Nixon?
He did. He flew right into China before President Nixon. And there's a great book, I think it's called Radicals on the Road, which looks at Eldridge Cleaver's travels. There's a lot on Panther leaders and their travels, their connections to places like Cuba and things like that. And the geopolitical role that people played, I mean, Malcolm X played a similar role. He traveled, all around the world, and he was greeted as not quite a head of state, but as somebody who was representative of a community not just an individual. So he was given a lot of respect. The Panthers actually had an international chapter, which was in Algeria. And Kathleen Cleaver's biography, which talks about the ups and downs of saying, I'm an internationalist, but then there you are in the world, and you realize I kind of have some American habits, expectations, limitations, and the confrontation of self. When even, for example, speaking of the language of English, you go out there in the world, people are speaking 4 or 5 languages, and how are you operating in that context when you want to be an internationalist, etc. So there were a lot of sort of learning as part of those international travels. Other thoughts? Okay, we'll come back after Cahoots.